a bombshell report to share with you. A famous lawyer was soliciting money to pay women making sexual misconduct allegations against candidate Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign. Getting paid to accuse the candidate? You don't think that's an incentive to fabricate stories? We're going to discuss it all with Alan Dershowitz. I'll also talk to White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders about the constant barrage of media attacks, some against her personally and the president. But first, the Democrats' Me Too suicide mission. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Okay, do you remember what I told you just a few nights ago? Female politicians and activists should also be really careful where they take this, because someday, maybe, men might decide to turn the tables on them and start launching their own, maybe it's called #MenToo movement, with wild, decades-old complaints against women in positions of power. You don't think it could happen? Just watch. Well, that didn't take long, did it? The first casualty is Andrea Ramsey, a Democrat running for Congress in Kansas. She's dropping out of the race after the Kansas City Star asked her about accusations in a 12-year-old lawsuit. The suit claimed Ramsey sexually harassed and retaliated against a male subordinate who had rejected her advances. According to multiple sources, the man who filed the case reached a settlement with the company, and court documents show that the case was dismissed after mediation back in 2006. Look, people settle suits all the time. They settle them for things that aren't true as well because they're just a nuisance and they'd rather not bother them. But drop out of the race more than a decade later for this? I think that's ridiculous. But this is the climate that Democrats have created. It is a trap that they themselves are now falling into. And believe me, I probably agree with that candidate on nothing. She's a favorite of Emily's list. I'm sure she and I wouldn't agree on most issues, but I think that situation is appalling. Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the new liberal morality brigade on Capitol Hill they're feeding on their own members. They've opened up an ethics probe into a Nevada Democratic Congressman, Reuben Cuong, over allegations of sexual harassment. Now, Pelosi and others have asked Cuong to step down, but he's refusing. He vows to clear his name. Again, another Democrat, and the witch hunt continues. And he questions Pelosi's newfound Me Too morality. Now, why does he do that? Cuong says that Pelosi and the Democratic Party knew about the allegations against him a year ago. He said they looked into them, they didn't find anything, and they continued investing millions in my campaign. He told that to ABC News. They went out there and they campaigned for me. Well, we invited him on the show tonight, but sadly, he declined. My friends, this Me Too madness is spinning dangerously out of control. And I think the people get it. Here are some of my listeners today on the radio.
I definitely think that this has gone to the extreme, and they have to do something to stop this.
I'm very sensitive to any type of sexual assault, but I feel that this hashtag this and hashtag that has become almost a fad.
From personal experience, people who have been really abused, sexually abused, are so upset about this movement, the Me Too movement, simply because they're making a joke out of the real people who've really been abused.
By the way, the phone lines today were jammed with female callers. Now, speaking of jokes, now Democrats are calling for the president to resign over misconduct allegations, you know, the ones you heard before the 2016 election. But as the Washington Post pointed out this morning, the Democrats may be overplaying their hand ahead of 2018 and 2020. This is the way I look at it. The left, in their blind rage against Trump, are unable to see the obvious. Their near constant demonization of Trump is starting to wear a little thin, and I think it could end up backfiring big time. Think about it. After tax reform is passed, the economy continues to grow, and more Americans are able to keep more of their own money. How much resonance will old accusations, partisan leaks, and identity politics really end up having? Will voters other than like the really hardcore activists in the donor class really have the appetite for the growing calls of Trump's resignation on these old allegations? Smack dab in the middle of one of the greatest economic booms we've seen perhaps since Reagan? Now, I doubt it. especially now that we're learning that women were being offered cash to tell their tales of alleged misconduct by Trump. What a crock this entire thing is. And and this small, I call it like this small craft advisory goes out to everybody in the media. Watch the current course you've charted, lest your own boats get swamped by the waves you create. Your reporting on the so-called Russian collusion has been as biased and misguided as the Mueller investigation itself. You need to offer more than 24/7 demonization of our president through leaks from Obama and Clinton partisans or from old accusers whose stories were already heard before Election Day. Are you ever going to do real reporting on how the president is reshaping our entire trade posture to boost U.S. manufacturing? Or maybe look into how small business optimism is skyrocketing due to the president's slashing of onerous, growth-killing regulations? And by the way, I have another question. Why does it take a group like Judicial Watch to beat so many of you in the media to stories about the Mueller investigation? You know, where are your FOIA requests? Or maybe only dig deep when it can hurt the president. I don't know. And since it looks like they've got nothing on the president, and the war on men is already backfiring, expect them to deploy even more desperate tactics in the new year. And that's the angle.
Let's bring in Kevin Brock, former FBI Assistant Director for Intelligence. Welcome. Good to have you with us.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
You know, today the president was pretty critical of the FBI. We want to play a little bit of what he said. Obviously, as these revelations surface of people who are having conversations that don't seem especially positive about the president, here's what he said.
It's a shame what's happened with the FBI. The level of anger at what they've been witnessing with respect to the FBI is certainly very sad.
And I want you to know that with me as your president, America's police will have a true friend and loyal champion in the White House, more loyal than anyone else can be. The President of the United States has your back 100%. I will fight for you, and I will never, ever let you down.
When you look at what they did with respect to the Hillary Clinton investigation, it was rigged. And there's never been anything like it in this country that we've ever found before. It's very, very sad. Very, very.
Okay, so he was all over the place there. He had criticism for the agency, but then he today spoke at the graduation and was very kind and very laudatory of those graduates and the people he says are defending this country. So what do you make of the two versions of statements today?
Well, goodness, it's, you know, it's kind of interesting. Last year, you had the Democrats claiming that the FBI's reputation is in tatters. This year, it's the Republicans claiming that. So it kind of depends a little bit on whose ox is being gored at a given time. But even beyond that, we have to be concerned in this country anytime there's a perception that the FBI is not being impartial, not being objective, or being biased in some way. Tremendously concerning. Why? Because we depend on the FBI, of all agencies, to conduct itself and conduct its investigations in a fair and impartial way. So anytime there's a perception about that, then that has to be addressed. Unfortunately, as Ed just ran through, there's been a litany of instances or things that have happened that have called that into question. If you'll notice, however, it really doesn't touch upon the hardworking agents and analysts and support people that the FBI have across this country working hard every day. When you look back through history and when you see the FBI kind of tripping up and running afoul or finding itself in these situations where there's a perception that there may be that the FBI is off the rails a little bit, it's because of decisions that generally occur at the headquarters level. I'm not casting stones. I worked at the headquarters level. I worked in the field. I worked at headquarters. I've seen the FBI from the field perspective, from headquarters perspective. And at headquarters is where the FBI is closest to the vector of political governance. And so there has to be care exercised by the director of the FBI and senior leadership that any decisions they make to involve the FBI in a particular investigation, especially when it's charged with political aspects. Those decisions have to be made very, very carefully. The actions that they take will be scrutinized in a way that they have to be cognizant that they could have an impact on giving the impression that the FBI is maybe favoring one side or the other. And so when we look back and we see a director of the FBI taking steps to do a unilateral public news conference and taking on responsibilities not normally ascribed to an FBI director, that should give us pause.
And it does open up criticism, open you up for criticism on a number of fronts. As you said, Republicans and Democrats have both been mad at James Comey at some point.
That's right.
Very mad. Today, the Attorney General addressed some of the criticism of the FBI. Here's what he said.
Well, I don't share the view that the FBI is not functioning at a high level all over the country. He spoke to them today, the first time a president in 47 years has spoken to the FBI at Quantico, their graduating police academy class.
So the Attorney General there trying to say, you know, broadly, I have confidence in the agency, and I don't agree with the assessment that they're not functioning at the highest levels.
And I'm not sure that's what I heard. I think everybody, and I want to reassure your viewers that the FBI works at a very high level. Mm-hmm. The FBI agents who are distributed across this country are working hard on their cases. And but again, when the FBI is pulled into situations where there are large political considerations, and in an investigation of a political candidate for presidency.
Both of them.
Both of them.
Yeah,
Hillary
at the
Clinton,
same time.
and then Donald Trump to follow, is fraught with peril, and so the FBI has to walk a fine line. It is going to pursue any indications or credible allegations or credible predication for corruption where they find it, but at the same time, they have to be very wary that they're not being manipulated into leveraging their substantial power into favoring one political side over another.
Yeah, and we know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these folks working really hard all around the clock. And I think the president's frustration is with the select group that we've heard more about. But I think he also realizes that the men and women out there working, he needed to praise them today, which he did as well. So, Kevin Brock, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Let it go, make my body go. Make our bodies higher and higher.